I'll be rolling down a hill like a snowball headed for hell.
Holding in the way, that's what I heard them say. They used to heed the words he said, but that was yesterday. Gold will turn to gray and youth will fade away. They'll never care about you, call you holding in the way.
Good morning. Welcome to another episode of Old Men in Chairs. I'm wearing my Hangover Gang t-shirt right now. Marks me as a fan of Tom McDonald. Tom just put out a video yesterday saying he's back. It's been a long time. It's been 4 months since I reacted to a Tom video. But he's promising that he's going to get back in the saddle and hopefully he'll get back to some of the great songs on his album that came out last fall and do some videos from that. Or he'll move on to something else. But he's promising a great year, and I believe him. Anyway, while we're waiting for that, I wanted to do a song by Merle Haggard called Are the Good Times Really Over? That's a question mark. The song came out in 1982. I'm a huge Merle Haggard fan. He became famous in the 60s, I guess, to the general population. I mean, he had been a country music star, if you followed that. But in the 60s, during the Vietnam era, he came out with a song, Okie from Muskogee, which was a song against the counterculture, making fun of the hippies and the people that he felt were disloyal and not supporting the Vietnam War. It was a very popular song, but it was a very divisive time. At first, the hippies weren't very happy with him. But when they looked into his background, saw some of his other work as a country singer, they couldn't help but admire the guy. A lot of people covered some of his songs. Mama Tried is probably the most famous. I think it was covered by the Grateful Dead. And by the end of his life, he'd come full circle, and he was the counterculture. This is probably in 1982. This is a pretty good indication of where he was.
I wish the buck was still silver and it was back when the country was strong. Back before Elvis, before the Vietnam War came along.
There's a lot in those first two lines. Even before he starts singing, the opening image was looked like, I'm not a car expert, but I would say it was a 1930s car. Merle was born in 1937, so he's 12, 13 years older than me. And so when he thinks of the good old days, he's mainly thinking of the post-war 50s, I think. Before Elvis, well, Elvis became famous around 56. So that kind of puts a time frame on it. And so you had a black and white picture of an old car, and then it turned to color, and all of a sudden you're in a 1980s traffic jam. He's longing for the simpler time before we had traffic jams. And when a buck was still silver. Now, unless you're as old as me, you may not remember that in the year 1965, Lyndon Johnson signed a law that basically took all the silver out of the coins. Up to that point, your dimes, your quarters, your silver dollars were all made of real silver. I can remember because I used to collect coins. I was 14 years old when that happened. My mother used to come home and dump out her purse, and I would go through all the coins and picked out the ones I wanted. And that up to 1965, they were all silver. You know, the penny was copper, and the nickel, I don't know what that was made of, but it wasn't silver. But the other coins were all silver. Almost instantaneously, within a couple weeks, all the silver coins went out of circulation because people knew the value of the silver was going to be worth more than the value of the coins. And boy, has that ever happened. You can't buy a silver dollar today, I don't believe, for much less than $20. And it was funny because LBJ promised us that that wasn't going to happen. He said, don't worry, we're going to take the silver out of the coins, but the silver's not going to increase in value because we've got plenty of silver and we'll make sure that the price doesn't rise. Well, that was a total lie. The pictures there, if you're not familiar, the opening picture was Norman Rockwell, famous illustrator. His pictures appeared almost every week on the cover of the Saturday Evening Post, which was a pretty good sized magazine with national circulation. The opening picture, that's American classic of Thanksgiving dinner, one of his most famous pictures. Traditional family gathering, grandma and grandpa, serving the turkey, the grandchildren and the children gathered around. Good times in America.
Before the Vietnam War came along, before the Beatles and yesterday, when a man could still work and still would, it's the best of the free life behind us now. The good times really over for good.
Are they really over? Merle has an optimistic view on this. He mentions the Vietnam War. Well, that's a not too distant memory in 1982. The war didn't really end until the Americans left in 1975. And that whole period was so divisive that even 7 years later, the wounds had not healed. Very divisive time. Maybe even more divisive than the last 3 years in our country. I don't know. They're close. So if you've lived through these 3 years, you got a pretty fair idea of how bad things were in Vietnam.
I wish Coke was still cola and a joint was a bad place to be. It was back before Nixon lied to us all on TV. Before microwave ovens, when a girl could still cook and still would.
And that's probably the biggest applause line of the whole song. In the first verse, he said, a man would still work. And then in the second verse, he said, when a woman could cook and still would. He's talking about the whole feminist movement and the movement away from traditional roles of women as the homemaker and the cook in the kitchen. There's a lot to be said for women's liberation and allowing women not fill that role if they don't want to. But on the other hand, a lot have been lost by women going into the workplace and competing and not having children. Most importantly, population is in danger. Present trends continue. Let's just notice one thing. What a beautiful voice Merle has. I mean, he's got the oaky drawl, but he sings beautifully. I was lucky enough about 25 years ago to go see a concert that featured Merle and Bob Dylan. They were touring together, and I went 2 nights in a row. Merle sang circles around Bob Dylan. Now, I know a lot of people don't think that's hard because they don't like Bob singing. I think Bob was in a period where his singing was a little off. But Merle, who was older than Bob at that time, but he was getting up in years, but his voice was just so perfect.
And still would. It's the best of free life behind us now. The good times really over for good. I'll be rolling down a hill like a snowball headed for hell, with no kind of chance for the flag or the Liberty Bell. wish the Ford and the Chevy would still last 10 years like they should. Is that all right?
Ford and Chevy went through some difficult times in the late 1900s. When I grew up, the joke was that Ford stood for fix or repair daily. And General Motors had a better reputation. But then I bought a brand new Chevy truck in 1972. And by 1982, when he's singing this song, that truck body had pretty much rusted out. They used the cheapest steel they could get, or they did something wrong. There's not too many of those cars on the road, but you used to see them a lot. The whole body was riding off of them. I think they've actually done a better job in more recent years. They had to. They had their clocks cleaned by the Japanese and other foreign manufacturers, Germans, in terms of quality. And a lot of people, figured that out. I had a Toyota, my next truck. You couldn't kill that thing. It went for 30 years and no maintenance and no rust on the body. So it was either compete or go out of business, and they damn near did. Ford in the 1980s decided they had a problem, and they came out with the slogan, "Quality is job one." And maybe that was PR for a while, but I think they really put more of an emphasis on quality. And I never even owned a Ford until I bought my current truck in 2017, I believe. And that truck's running great. 6 years old, no rust. I think all of the American manufacturers, what's left of them, have had to maybe get a little better quality. Are we rolling downhill like a snowball headed for hell? Well, they've been saying that all my life. And I didn't believe them for a long time. But more and more, it sure looks that way.
Liberty Bell. I wish the Ford and the Chevy would still last 10 years like they should. Is that all right? The best of the free life behind us now. The good times really over for good. Stop rolling downhill like a snowball headed for hell. Thank you, Willie. Stand up for the flag and let's all ring the Liberty Bell.
So now he's turned it. He's not asking a question. He's telling you, stop rolling downhill like a snowball. Stand up for the flag and the Liberty Bell. And this is Merle's most patriotic best. and what's he showing us? Pictures of the Vietnam War and young men fighting and dying for our country. It wasn't their fault. They were patriotic. They went and did their duty. You've got to have respect for the men that served, and many did not come back. Many of my contemporaries never made it back from Vietnam.
And let's all ring the Liberty Bell. Let's make a Ford and a Chevy that would still last 10 years like they should. 'Cause the best of the free life is still yet to come. The good times ain't over for good.
I hope that's true, Merle. That the good times are not over and the best times are yet to come. A very optimistic song back in the day. And 40 years later, it's actually harder to be optimistic. But there's something yet in the American character that's indomitable. Hopefully will never go away.
What I heard them say, they used to